Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We are very, very grateful and we're flattered to have Justin Lee join us tonight. And Justin is the founder of Focus for Growth and he's a consultative sales trainer. And I'll let him explain what that is, but it covers a myriad of things. And Justin's going to say through the presentation, as he said, going to be a lot of information. It's going to be moving quite quickly. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the question box. If it's relevant to where we're going, we'll pick it up as we go. If not, we'll grab it at the end. Both Chris and I have worked with Justin for a while, and he's a great guy. His energy knows no limits. He's always on the go. He's a writer, Inspire, Influence, Sell. When he finished that one, he went straight on and did Inspire, Consult, Sell, both Amazon bestsellers. If you don't have them, I recommend that you grab them. I'll pass over to Justin so that he can tell you his story and what he's got for you tonight. And then we'll have some questions at the end. So over to you, Justin.
Yeah, take it away, Justin. Looking forward to this. No pressure.
Me too. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chris. First of all, Andy, Chris, thanks for inviting me to speak with you and your clients and customers this evening. And thanks everybody for joining us. We will have a great session this evening, and I have got some slides that I'll present, which hopefully just give you some reminders of the content and make things a little more, kind of just join up the dots a bit more for you. And I'm very happy to share the slides with you after tonight's session. So I'll do that through Andy and Chris. They'll email them out because they'll have your details once you've registered for this evening as well. So good evening, everybody. And huge thanks for joining me on what is, a World Cup match night with Brazil playing this evening. So I appreciate you being here. Now that I've told you that, please don't drop off and watch Brazil play. But we've got some really useful content this evening. We're going to talk about how we start to develop a more patient-centered practice, and that will fuel growth. And we're really looking at how we can grow our practice, particularly private practice. And through tonight's session, it's about increasing future value, because at some point, many of you will want to exit, or you might want to, step back or go into partnership. But actually, it's about what is the future value for you, and how do you maximize that going into the future. And of course, we start that process as soon as possible. And if you haven't really thought about it tonight, I'm hoping it's going to stimulate some thinking for you. And this session really is about just planting some seeds, sharing some insights, with a view to kind of just helping you to think a little bit differently about some of the things you're doing in practice, creating some space to build a plan that is a growth plan for the future of you, your team, and your practice. So we will look at we'll look at some outcomes for this evening. You've seen this as you registered, but it is about growing the private practice to increase its future value. We'll look at this model that we work with lots of business teams with and practice teams with, called the Inspire Communication Model. I'll talk about that at the right stage of the webinar this evening, and really start to share some of the best practice principles that you can apply to your own practice, so that you're improving communication, you're improving kind of goal setting, you're thinking about future growth, and kind of onboarding your team as part of that growth mission. And we'll look at 3 simple principles. We've got a couple of polls this evening, so we'll get some interaction going as well. And in terms of GDC development outcomes, if you're logging, it's A, B, and D, so no clinical content this evening. But Andy very kindly introduced me. Just I'll give you a bit of background for those of you who perhaps haven't been on sessions with me or haven't had the experience of working with me. I started my career in dentistry as a dental technician 33 years ago, believe it or not. And I was in the lab for about 4 years, finished my apprenticeship, worked a short time at the bench, and then realised that I wasn't really cut out to be a dental technician. So then I went into dental sales, and I had quite an interesting career in sales. I had 2 or 3 different sales positions in dentistry. And then I joined 3M. And having joined 3M, I was then identified as somebody who could be in a leadership position. And I was then invited to go onto a leadership kind of fast track. And that took me out of dentistry. So in around kind of mid-2000s, about 2004, 2005, I left dentistry and went into a leadership position at 3M, and then ended up managing multiple businesses for 3M in different industries, in medical, in graphics and films, in IT services, in healthcare diagnostics, and lots of different businesses. And what I learned through those roles and through that process and that period of time was that a lot of principles that you apply in leadership to grow businesses, to engage teams, to engage customers, patients, a lot of the principles are similar as you apply them to different businesses. And so in 2017, when I kind of realized that I'd reached the pinnacle of my career in the corporate world, I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I'd gone as far as, probably a little bit further than I wanted to go, to be honest. So I left the corporate world. I retrained then as an executive coach and realized that the things I really enjoyed doing were engaging with customers, coaching business leaders, coaching and developing and training people. And it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. So I then set up this business Focus for Growth and started to work with customers. That was 5 years ago now. And more and more, my customers have become customers that are operating in the dental market. So I work with suppliers to the dental market, and I work with dental practices and with corporates and DSOs. So what I found in my career and what we find with the customers that we work with, it's really easy. If you've been in practice or in business for a long time, it's really easy to start to drift and to start to feel perhaps a little less engaged, a little less motivated, for your results to be a little less consistent, and for a bit of negativity to creep in. And so some of the work we do with our clients is kind of bringing them back to some of the fundamentals. How do we get back to high engagement? How do we get our teams performing? How do we improve consistency and get results kind of delivering at the level that we want, and perhaps that we were getting earlier in our careers? And sometimes it's just about revisiting some of those fundamentals, which we're going to cover tonight. And along the way, I've been really blessed and honoured to have been recognised with a number of different business awards. This year in particular, I'm in the Dental Industry Awards next week as Business Leader of the Year. I was recognised by the SME Huntingdonshire Awards as Business Leader of the Year, and I'm in the finals, which is also happening next week, funnily enough. So I've got 2 awards events next week. And as Andy said, I've written 2 books, both of which became Amazon bestsellers, which again, nobody was more surprised than me that they did so well. But we take those models and really try to look at the content and the depth of the systems and the principles in the books and apply them to the practice. That's really what we're trying to do. So that's a bit about me. I'd love to learn a bit about who we have on our call this evening. So we've got an interactive poll that I'm going to run. So let me just start this with everybody. So you should see a poll come up on your screen now. If you could just click on the poll. So we're just looking at what best describes your role. Are you a practice owner or practice principal? Are you a practice leader or a practice manager? I do distinguish between leadership and management, but for this evening, practice leader or manager. Are you a partner, an associate, or an aspiring practice principal? Perhaps you're looking to become a practice principal in the near future. Or is there something else? And if you've clicked on other, then just put it in the chat and then we'll know who we've got on the roll. So thank you all so much for taking part. So let me share those results with you. We've got 70% of people on the call this evening are practice owners or principals. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. 10% associates. Thank you for joining us. 10% aspiring practice principal. Good luck. I hope tonight helps you to start to think about consolidating those aspirations. And then we have one other as well. So thank you for answering that. That's great. Let me just check that I've not missed anything in the chat. Not yet. But if you wanted to put your role in the chat, then please feel free to do so. Okay. So a really good mix of people with us this evening. Second poll. So we're going to do 2 back-to-back. The next one is about your biggest challenge in growing your practice going forward. So I'm going to open up this poll in a second. But so challenges that you face in your practice. So are there? And let me launch that poll. So challenges that you face. Number 1 is setting the goals and targets for growth. Number 2 is getting your team on board to grow. So you could set goals, but your team need to be on board, right? 3 is knowing how to grow the practice. So I can set the goals, then what do I do about those goals? 4 is actually being happy with the status quo, you or your team, and then overcoming that inertia. You get to a point where you've been in business for a while, and there's this inertia that sets in, this kind of satisfaction, if you like. And then finally, making time to take action on the growth plan. So you have a plan and making time to take action on it. Thank you for those of you who are participating in the polls. That's great, excellent. And then if there's anything else that's different from what we've discussed, or from those 5, then click on the other challenges and then share them in the chat box if you wouldn't mind. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So what have we got? First is knowing how to grow the practice. So that's so great. And how do you grow the practice? Second is other challenges. We'll look at those in a second. And then the other 3 are getting our team on board to grow. Really important, the team are on board with it. Then equal to that is happy with the status quo and overcoming that inertia that sets in. It's very common in a lot of businesses, not just dentistry. And then finally, making time to take action on the growth plan. Okay, great. Thank you. That's super. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks. And it is the chat. So Hugo and Stephen saying the chat is disabled. Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, if you don't mind, just if you just share it in the questions section instead of the chat, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to enable the chat. So if you would share them in the questions, that'd be great. Thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so just put everything, if you don't mind, put everything in the Q&A box this evening. Okay, so I talk about this content with a lot of people, a lot of practices, a lot of businesses. As Stephen says, the biggest challenge is getting staff. Absolutely, yeah, that's a huge challenge at the moment, and prevalent right the way across dentistry. And interestingly, not just dentistry. There's a lot of businesses that are finding getting the right quality and attitude of person in their businesses or practices. Some of the content we start to talk about tonight will start to sow some seeds and give you some ideas about that as well. So thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you mentioning that challenge. Okay, so this is what comes up generally. So number 1, people talk about setting goals and targets for growth. That tends to be quite a common challenge, and that does link to this kind of happy with the status quo or overcoming inertia. Not a lot of people not even having thought about setting goals and targets for the practice growth. Second is knowing how to grow the practice. So that came up this evening in our chat. And then 3 is getting our team on board to grow. So we'll have a look at these 3 as part of tonight's webinar, because they're our 3 predominant themes. If we can overcome these challenges, then it sets us in the right trajectory to start to grow and increase future value. I'll share some other data with you. We have this tool in our business that we use with practices and practice teams called the Patient Experience Scorecard. And it's 36 assessment statements that we ask, that you log onto an online portal, you rank yourself or your opinion against these 36 assessment statements. And then it presents you with a personal development report with scores in different areas of managing your practice. And we kind of recommend it mainly for dentists, associates, TCOs, hygienists, therapists. It's been really useful in helping people to get some awareness of where they can focus around the patient experience and growth for the business. And what's interesting, we get these 4 kind of areas that come up. So key focus areas, we ask these different statements. One of them that's really interesting, I make regular improvements that benefit our patients and their relationship with the practice. And we've got really, almost a 50-50 split here. 51% of people saying, yes, we do make regular improvements that benefit patients and their relationship with our practice, but then 49% saying they don't. Then we've got the patient experience. This is an interesting one. So 75% of people who take our scorecard, and we've had, as you saw, just over 1,200 people take it so far, 75% of people saying we need to revisit our patient experience. And then, of course, we're not making regular improvements to benefit that patient experience. Third area is about understanding the importance of running my practice as a business and allocating the time to do it. 60% of people saying they do, but of course, by default, 40% saying they don't. And then finally, investing time regularly to communicate to our team about the goals for the practice. 57% of people saying they do that, but of course that means 43% not taking the time to regularly communicate with the team. So we'll look at these as we go through this session this evening. Great. Okay, Hugo, thank you. Hugo is the owner of a dental TikTok marketing and consultancy agency. Thank you, Hugo. Welcome, and hopefully picking up some new ideas to best coach practices to improve sales processes. Thank you. That's great. That's great, Hugo. I hope you get a lot from it this evening as well. So we have three key challenges, and we'll address these. The thing is, if we don't understand the challenges, it can be really easy to kind of fall into the trap of repeating them. So sometimes actually just exploring, like, what does that mean? What is the challenge? Why is setting goals a problem? Why is getting the team on board a problem? Why is not knowing how to grow the practice a problem? So just quickly kind of surface on the three challenges. So the first one is setting goals for the practice. So running a practice is hard work. Running a business is hard work. It's particularly hard work running a practice. Now, it's rewarding for many people, and a lot of practices find they do have a stable patient base, and they receive kind of a trickle of ongoing inquiries. So that's the kind of the norm in a practice. And allowing the clinical practice to kind of just go along as it does is comfortable. It's minimally disruptive to the team and to you as a practice owner. And there's this principle of kind of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I think we probably can all relate to that as a challenge, because the danger is that we might become complacent, and our teams may become complacent. But then once you've been doing that for a period of time, knowing where and when to start with goal setting to create a change can cause us to feel a bit of doubt, and potentially even as owners of businesses, fear of that change that is inevitable as a result of us setting goals and starting to move in a different direction. But the challenge is, if we don't decide what we want in terms of forward movement and growth, then nothing changes. Nothing, we can't change course to achieve it. So if we don't have goals, we don't grow. We're not clear on it, we don't change. And so everything kind of just feels the same as it does, as it always has done. And the challenge with that is also that can leave us feeling a little bit disconnected. And at times it can start to feel like, that we're going through just like mundane day-to-day kind of experiences in the practice. And the challenge then, of course, is that can feel the same for our teams. So if we feel that as leaders, it absolutely feels like that for our teams. So challenge number 2 is knowing, so even if you have set goals, how do you start to grow? And knowing where to start with a growth plan is difficult. I think the more established the practice, the longer you've been in practice, the more difficult it is to some extent. And so then thinking about what are the key areas for improvement, what are the key areas for progress, what are the key areas where we could grow, that can feel overwhelming and almost impossible to kind of get your arms around. It can feel really intangible. And I know this from talking to clients and from my own experiences running the businesses that I've run in the past as well. And we know that creating any change requires focus and effort. And it can be difficult to do that on top of all the other work you've got to do, particularly if you're still practicing clinically. To think about, growing your practice on top of, managing your patient list, managing the practice team or your practice manager, that can feel like a real challenge in itself. And the thing is, you think about goal setting. I love this chart, because on the surface, this is what people think happens. You have this great idea, someone gives you some money, you make it happen, and then you've got this overnight success. Everybody appears to be an overnight success. We always compare ourselves to people who have already achieved what we're looking to achieve. But you'll also know from your own experiences, and I know this from my own experiences, this is how it really is, right? You start, you kind of feel very insecure for a lot of the time. You work absolutely as hard as possible, and nobody sees that work that you do. I mean, nobody sees that we're on a webinar 7 till 8 on the 24th of November on Thursday night, when everyone else is drinking wine and beer and watching Brazil play football, right? It's all part of your growth journey. Then, you fail a little bit or a lot. You get some help, life gets in the way, or it helps and supports you. And then all of a sudden you do find a way through, right? But it's never a straight line to growth. And so we have to recognize that there are some challenges along the way. We'll talk about how we manage that as we go along. And then the third challenge is, we might have some goals, we might have a plan, we might go, right, I know what I'm going to do. And then actually you can't do this stuff on your own. It's not possible. We have to get the team on board. And when principals or partners or business owners want to grow their practice, they often get a sense of resistance from their team. And it's like a low-level, unconscious intuition, resistance from your team to change. And it can surface for you as a practice principal or an owner. It makes you feel cautious. Sometimes it makes you feel anxious. Sometimes it makes you feel guilty about trying to push change through, when you talk about practice targets and revenue growth. And these are all common symptoms that we face as we start to think about a growth journey. And then, of course, creating time to discuss the goals, discuss the plans. It can seem alien to your teams. I had this conversation with somebody just today about how those early conversations felt so alien, just trying to change the way that the team think about the practice. And if you haven't experienced it in the past, and so your teams haven't experienced it, they feel it's alien, you start to lead those discussions, you feel awkward, and all of a sudden you kind of think, actually, it's easier not to do it. But we're going to help you overcome this evening. It's not all doom and gloom. But understanding the problem is really important to understanding the solution. And I love this chart here. Just starts us thinking. When you think about practice growth, you think about the things that you find are important, what you think is important, and then what interests your team, or what interests your patients, or what interests other key stakeholders in your practice. Very often, very different spheres. And what we have to do is recognize that really all we should focus in on is the part of which those two things overlap, right? What's important for us to grow the practice, what interests our team and our patients, and that's the sweet spot. That's where we really need to focus in on. That's what's most relevant to our teams and our patients and stakeholders. So the consequence of those three things is that we just don't do it, okay? So we don't communicate, we don't set the goals, the practice remains stable, but we don't get the growth that perhaps we feel is possible. And I heard this phrase many times, that I feel like I'm sitting on a gold mine, not in terms of the practice, but I just can't seem to get the momentum going. And so really want to fulfill the true potential and realize the future value. That's what tonight's all about. But if we don't do this, then culture can become safe and routine. Teams feel as if they're going through the motions. I said that earlier. Communication as leaders of practices can be functional, almost tactical on a day-to-day basis, not transformational, not inspiring for people. And without growth goals, there's a little challenge. And I can't repeat this enough. It's not common. It's not unique to dentistry. It's common across all businesses. Teams feel less motivated if they're in a business that's not growing or doesn't have growth goals. They don't come up with suggestions for improvements if they don't think the business is moving or going anywhere. We can find that behaviors slip, and the resistance to change then builds, and you kind of get this. It's stable, but it's also can feel a little bit constrained, and this sense of untapped potential. So what we have to do is we have to change. Okay, so we have to make this change. We have, as leaders of the practices, we have to change our perspective first. When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. That's really, really important for us to recognise that. And I share this chart with you because I share this on most webinars I do with my dental clients. It just helps to kind of think about where is the patient in their experience and their journey with us as a practice team, and how do we need to communicate with the patient to guide their decision making as we go through some of our consultations, some of the value propositions that we explain to patients. And hopefully you'll find it's the same. You'll notice that we're going from the bottom up, and you'll see that on the left hand side we've got one of these funnels, like a sales funnel. You'll be familiar with those. And if you think about the traditional sales funnel, it looks like this. And the challenge with the traditional sales funnel is that it makes this inherent assumption that customers get drawn down through the funnel with gravity. And actually, if your experience is anything like my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. Actually, we have to work hard to get patients to be drawn up through that funnel, to consider treatment options, to make the right decisions, to then gain their commitment to start treatment, to then take payment, to actually get them to attend appointments. All that stuff takes effort on behalf of us and our team. So I'll talk you through this patient journey and how we can align our communication process, because it creates a lot of light bulb moments for people. So the patient starts their journey with us unaware, either unaware that there is a requirement for treatment, or unaware of the capability that we have, or unaware that they actually could get something that they really want, but they just don't realize it's possible with us and our practice. So what we do is make sure that we're well prepared, make sure the practice is prepared, make sure the image is right, make sure that all of the team are armed with the right information, so that as we start to communicate with patients, as they go through their experience with us, the preparation that we've laid in place starts to move the patient along their journey from unaware to attentive. So we want people's attention in the first stage, and it's early in the cycle. We want people to be attentive to what we're capable of. And once we've got someone's attention, then our job is to start to share some insights, not to start to talk about treatment or treatment plans or the capability we have or any of that, but to share some insights, about trends, about what other patients are experiencing, about new technologies. And those insights, when we share them with patients, we move the patient from attention to interested. Okay, and this is really important to go from attentive to interested. And when a patient's interested, our job then, for most people, this is the biggest mistake they make. They start to then talk about treatments. Our job at that stage, when we have someone that's interested, our job is to say to them, that's great that you're interested. Tell me a bit more about what you're looking for. And ask them questions so that they can really clearly explain their own needs. And as they explain their own needs, they start to process their thoughts, process their own requirements, desires. And as they do that, the reason we ask those questions, one is so that we understand, but two is so that they clarify their thinking. And in clarifying their thinking, they sell themselves from being interested to having a desire to change. And they'll only do that if we ask them the right questions, listen carefully, and guide the consultation. And when the patient's in a position where they have a desire for change, that's the point at which we start to talk about treatment solutions, but not before. And this is the biggest miss, not just in dentistry, in lots of different business settings. Talking about solutions too early, when the patient or the customer is only attentive, is the biggest mistake that people make in communication. And by talking about a solution, when the patient is at a point of desire, they're prepared then to take action as the next step. And when a patient's prepared to take action, that's when we make a proposal. Okay, so based on the different solutions we've talked about, here's what I propose. And because the patient's in the right stage of their journey, the right decision-making stage, they're much more likely to then say, yes, please, I'll sign up for treatment. And once someone signs up for treatment, our job then is to make sure that we initiate that first or that final stage. So we either process a payment, or we make sure they're booked in, or we take a deposit, or we just make sure we get some form of commitment. We initiate commitment at that stage. And by initiating commitment at the right stage with the patient, long-term, what we're looking for then, because we've now gained the commitment of the patient, long-term, what we're looking for is to create loyal patients that choose the practice, that don't really think about price because they have this relationship established with us as clinicians, but also our teams. And we do that through a process of reflection, just continuing ongoing reflection about, the way that we're running the practice, the way that we're positioning treatment, the conversations we're having, the questions we're asking, the branding, all of the different components that start to influence patients' decision. And this really is the ideal process to follow the patient journey. Now, the challenge is that the usual process, what we find very often, and again, we're relating this to the patient journey. This happens in all sorts of businesses, and you might even have experienced this yourself if you've had a poor sales experience. We find that a lot of people are kind of underprepared in the first instance. They make a good introduction. They don't ask enough questions, if any. They then try to solve a problem for the person or the patient. They then end up pitching what they think they can do. They meet indecision from the patient, and then when they repeat the cycle, they kind of think, oh, why are we not getting the conversion rates or the case acceptance rates that we should be getting when we've made all these investments in the practice? So you can see how really starting to lean into this patient journey and understand our sales or consultative sales process alongside it is really, really important for us if we want to increase kind of opportunities within practice and opportunities for growth. And that I showed it as a linear process there. The way that we introduce it as part of the work we do with clients is to think about it as a cycle. So we think about, at the heart of our cycle is the relationship with the patient, establishing and strengthening relationships, the preparation that we do to make sure that all of the practice team are on board, that we have the right information, that we're really clear in our communication. We lead with insight first, then we discover the patient's needs, then we talk about a solution, then we make a proposal. And you'll see that these arrows here are multi-directional. So if we get to this stage and we meet any kind of resistance from the patient, we just work backwards and ask a few more questions, clarify a few things with the patient, and then work back through the model. And then the final stage is initiate action. It's such an important stage. It's such an important commitment to gain from the patient, because that really does help them to make the commitment to themselves for the results they're looking for. And then this final stage of reflection. And as you can see, it becomes a self-fulfilling, almost like an evolutionary cycle with our communication with patients that just keeps us and our teams improving over time, so that we kind of break through this inertia when we start to think about this as a cycle rather than a one-time event. And a couple of things that I learned a couple of times in my career, I learned quite a powerful lesson. One was when I was in a sales position and I hadn't been selling particularly effectively. And I learned from a sales training program, very good sales training program that I went on, that actually the way to gain commitment, the way to start to really positively influence people, is to draw or pull it from them rather than push it, rather than just keep telling people stuff. Actually to draw it, ask questions, learn, and help the other person to kind of come to you rather than feel like you're directing or pushing them. The second time I learned that this principle, commitment is pulled, not pushed, is when I was in my first leadership role as a sales manager, and I was terrible. So the first sales management role I had, was terrible. I was far too directive, far too pushy, and recognized actually very quickly, thankfully, with the help of a good mentor and coach, that I needed to switch gears and really start to ask questions of my team, start to seek their opinion, gain their own engagement and intrinsic motivation. And that shifted everything for me as a leader. So as someone who could sell effectively, somebody who could lead effectively, this is my kind of number one takeaway. Pull it from people, don't push it on them. And so we've got these three challenges. We talked a little bit about the patient experience, the patient journey, how our communication aligns with it. So hopefully you're starting to get some of these insights, and you can see how this helps you and your teams in practice. So let's talk about our three challenges: setting goals and targets, getting our team on board to grow, and knowing then how to grow the practice. So number one, set a goal. We'll go through this. Define your why, set targets to meet the goal. And then by defining those targets, you create a point of focus, which helps you understand why you want to achieve your goals, and then kind of starts to give you drive. All of these things overcome the inertia of long-term practices. So recognize, first of all, nothing changes until we change. In my business, nothing changes until I decide it's time to change, because our teams won't do it for us. And so the first step in growing our practice is to set a goal, a growth goal. And without that goal, we just don't have direction. We are kind of more inclined to just keep repeating each year or each week and month. And so we set this overarching goal. And by doing that, our team can clearly define it and understand it, and we can articulate it. It can be anything. So for a couple of examples here. So to be the first choice for aesthetic dentistry in the south of England might be a goal that you set, and you start to talk about that goal. It might be to be the leader in preventative dentistry in the north of England, for example, but to kind of set your stall out to say, actually, this is something aspirational we want to achieve as a practice. And then once you've set that goal, the next thing then is to go, okay, so that's great to have that goal. Why is that important? Why do you even care? Okay. And the reason we kind of start to unpack and explore the reason why is because that is what creates our own internal motivation. So the reasons why we do things are far more compelling for us than the actual goals that we set. So that introspective view, I've set a goal. Why have I set that goal? Why is this important for me personally to deliver it? And once you've set the kind of aspirational goal, you understand why, then it's about saying, well, if that's what we want, actually, let's start to make more tangible targets. So you might start to think about revenue level. What level of revenue do you want for the practice? What about profit? What level of profit do we want to achieve? How many patients do we want for perhaps private patients or for different treatment types? How many specialist treatment types and how often do we want to be engaging patients in them? How many surgeries or chairs? What size of team do we want ultimately? And whilst these all sound like obvious things, it's very easy to kind of lose sight of them if we don't actually start to set them as goals. And the reason this is so important is because the way our minds work, our mind has this system in it called the reticular activating system. And what the reticular activating system is responsible for is for screening out things that we see as unimportant or irrelevant. And so, if any of you have recently in the last year or so bought a new car or a new piece of kit that's particularly expensive, in advance of buying it, you will have noticed that you started to see that everywhere. So if it was a car, you'll have seen it on the road everywhere. If it was a piece of kit, you'll have noticed it in journals, you'll have noticed that your friends had it or someone else in the practice has got it. And the reason that happens is because your brain, once you've decided you want something, your brain becomes like a laser. It starts to focus on it and it literally screens out everything else. That's why goal setting is so important, because it starts to focus our mind at this kind of unconscious level that we don't even realize is happening. And we have this target setting template that sometimes if you're just trying to map out, okay, where do I go? We've got a really nice template. It just helps you to map out some of the income layers, and by month you can kind of look at private plan, for example. On here, you could look at specific treatments. You could look at the values of those treatments per month. You'll see at the bottom, it also translates into numbers of treatments as well as the revenue value. Then you've got your operating costs in the middle. So you can just start to build like a mini P&L for your business or your practice. So you can start saying, actually, if we wanted to get some growth going next year, what would that look like? How would we plug in some numbers that just start us thinking about growth goals? So that's kind of some of the stuff we do around target setting. So hopefully this is kind of getting you thinking about some of the key actions you can take, and we'll give you some time to reflect on that at the end and take Q&A. Okay, so goal setting, target setting, quite straightforward really when you actually think about it, even though it's something that it eludes a lot of people. Second then, so we've got some targets. Second then is, how do we enroll the team on the mission? And business growth, practice growth is a team sport. It can only happen when everybody's on board. Otherwise, you feel like you're doing a disproportionate amount of the work. So we can only communicate our goals to our teams and the meaning of them if we're clear on them. Okay, so that's why the first step is so important. What are the goals for the practice? Why are they important? And then specifically, tangibly, what does that look like, so that we can articulate it and share it. But also, having a bigger purpose. And a bigger purpose, I mean, not just doing the day-to-day stuff, thinking what we do on a day-to-day basis joins up with a growth plan that we're all invested in, is really powerful for people working in a practice or a business. Everybody gets confidence from knowing that we're in a business that wants to grow, and being part of a team that are all trying to achieve the same goal. There's real kind of energy, there's motivation, there's higher levels of engagement. And we talked about the recruitment situation at the moment. If you're in a practice that's got an energy about growth and you're all moving in the same direction, everyone feels connected to it, there's recognition and reward for being on that growth journey and contributing to making it happen, that creates a new level of energy. Now, it means that you are much more likely to retain high quality staff. It also means that when you are advertising for new staff, even if it's a challenge getting people through the door, once they're through the door, when they sense that energy, that positivity of your team, they feel like they're joining an organization that's really going somewhere. That is really, really attractive to people. So it kind of helps with engagement of your own staff and attraction of new staff. And, when you're in a growing, I talked about this, when you're a growing practice, there is an energy, it inspires the entire team. Everybody starts to feel it. And also so do patients. So patients sense when they're in a good environment, a great culture. And because it's a team sport, it's most effective when everybody's on board, when everybody understands it and everybody's engaged to join the mission. And what I advise, once you've got this in place and you start to talk to your teams, I advise discussing your plans with your team as a team at practice team meetings, but also with each team member one-to-one. Short conversation with every team member one-to-one, just to be able to look them in the eye, make your commitments to them and ask for theirs. And in particular, ask them about their own motivation. What is it they're looking to achieve, as part of the practice team, maybe even as what are they looking for long-term in their career? What is it that drives and motivates them? And for some people, it may just be being really good at the job, getting praise, reward, recognition. And that's brilliant to hear that. So then we start to think about, okay, well, what is the reward for being part of the growth ambitions? And, thinking about your team's perspective, what's in it for them, what's in it for me, i.e. your team, is really important, because it's so often overlooked. We kind of just assume people, they're paid to do a job. But actually, whilst that's true, people want something more. And if we're able to give them something more, then really it's quite simple to do it. And you'll notice that I'm going to bring you back to the target setting template. In the target setting template, there's a line at the bottom here for thinking about bonuses for your teams and building that in to your financial plan, so that if you hit your numbers, your team are rewarded. And you build it in so that it's self-funded through the numbers, through the growth trajectory, through the growth ambitions of the practice. And whilst you wouldn't necessarily share the full numbers with the team, what you could do is share these bottom figures, which are just numbers of patients. So number of patients on private plans, number of patients for Invisalign, composite bonding, general private treatment, etc. And you would make your own categories up. But saying to your teams, if we hit these numbers, because you've already done the financial modeling, if we hit these numbers of patients each month, then it unlocks a team bonus. And that team bonus is, you would decide on your numbers, but it starts to give your teams a vested interest in the growth ambitions of your practice. And by setting it up like this, it really does start to join up the dots from every single person that works with you, through to the patients that you're treating, through to the numbers that you want to hit. And all of a sudden, the growth in your practice starts to almost fuel itself. So that's kind of getting the team on board. Third, how do you do this? So one of the things I see a lot of really successful practices do is define a specialist interest or a unique selling proposition, what's unique about the practice. And the clearer we can be on the type of dentistry we want to do and the type of patients that we want to attract, the better, because that helps us. It helps us and it helps our teams. And the clearer we are, the easier it is to communicate to the right potential patient, right? And what we should really be thinking about is the areas of specialist interest, one that we're passionate about, that we think make a difference because we like to see the results for the patient, but two, that you enjoy and are good at. So what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy? What are you good at? And then just start to really open that up as an opportunity for you to grow into your, clinical specialty. And that becomes your own sweet spot. And you see specialists really do kind of have this attraction. They have, really targeted approach, whereas there's nothing wrong with general dentistry, but if it's general dentistry, decide that it's general dentistry and then specialize in that. But generalists on the whole tend to find it's less easy to articulate what it is that you stand for. But when you feel more motivated and you find your own thing, then your dentistry becomes more enjoyable, more effortless, and you feel at ease about the work that you do that kind of transcends just practical clinical dentistry. Now, if you are in routine general dentistry and you're not enjoying it, then start to think about how you specialize. One of the things that I've seen with some of my clients that works really well is to build a multidisciplinary team around you. They don't have to be in your practice. They can be other referral centers if you want, but get other people to start to pick up the areas of dentistry that you no longer want to practice. Therapists are really great for this as well. They can pick up so much of that routine general dentistry that's important for patients, but perhaps isn't something that you want to be doing yourself if you want to specialize. And once you specialize, you start to communicate it. Your team all know that it's happening. You'll start to attract the right types of patients. Patients are more attracted to specialists, not generalists, as we know, especially when it comes to aesthetic or cosmetic treatment. And the sooner you get started, the sooner you'll start to move towards the goals that you set for the future. And really, there's this whole piece around intention, because nothing changes until you make the intention, start communicating, and really start to drive that change in your practice. And recently I wrote, so there are 3 key principles. I wrote this article for one of the journals, I can't remember which journal, but it was this top 10 tips of how to unlock practice growth. And my team turned it into this really nice infographic with 10 different principles. And we covered the first 3 this evening. There are 7 more, believe it or not. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through them. You are going to get to see the second half of the Brazil match, don't worry. But I very happily share this with you. The article we've written as well, I can share the article and the top 10 tips. I think you'll find it's, hopefully you'll find it's a bit of a roadmap to helping you unlock practice growth and build your plans. So remember that, in lots of contexts where this is relevant, enthusiasm has a half-life, right? So right now you might think, oh, there's some great ideas there, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. It's the same with your patients, right? We need to make sure that we always get that commitment from people to move forward. So I'd love for you to now think about, just take a moment to think about your biggest takeaways from what we've covered so far this evening. What are the key actions that you need to take? You can just make a note to yourself. If you'd like to put them in the Q&A chat, I would love that. I'm just going to give you a moment just to process those kind of thoughts on, okay, what is it that I'm going to do now based on what I've heard Justin ramble on about for the last 45 minutes or so. Just take a moment to capture them. If you want to put them in the questions and answers box, feel free to do so. I'm going to give you a moment to do it. While you're doing that, very often the question I get asked at this stage of conversations with clients or presentations like this is, well, that's all very good. What if we wanted some help with this? How would that work, Justin? What does it look like? So if you're interested, I'll just, for a couple of minutes, I'll just share some other things with you that might be useful. Based on the work that we're doing in Focus Growth, we're launching this open program. So up until now, I've been working with kind of a lot of businesses who are serving the dental market, some corporates and some larger group practices. But we've had quite a few inquiries from people saying, well, if we wanted to come, a couple of dentists or one of our team wanted to come, what would that look like? So we're opening this Practice Growth Academy that starts in January. So we will be inviting kind of individual dentists, individual therapists, anybody that kind of is looking to grow their kind of consultation and communication process. That's where we're starting with our growth journey. And we've got this Practice Growth Academy. The way it works is we invite everybody to take the patient experience scorecard, which I talked about earlier. You get your personal development report with the recommendations. We then start with 2 days training and coaching workshops. And we've got this great principle that we're bringing over from our business programs called accountability partners. And what that is that as we start the program, we just join everybody up with a partner for accountability. And so coming in, you start to share your goals, you start to share some of the challenges you face. And as you're working through the content, you have one other person that is someone that you can just bounce ideas off, but also is there to help you be accountable to do what you have committed to do. So we start with accountability partners on our 2-day workshop. We offer, everybody gets a copy of the Inspire Consult Sell book. Whether you want it or not, you get one. And they're signed and ready for you. We also have this Practice Growth Academy online program, which takes all of our content and breaks it down into 10-minute video chunks. So if you finish the 2 days and you think, oh, I want to go back and look at the modules on the patient experience, I want to look at the modules on the key questioning skills or how to gain commitment from patients, you can go back and look at those modules online. So you've always got access to that as a program and a follow-up. We use this really nifty toolkit for implementation. It's electronic, it's an Excel document, it's got all of these different pages. So you just fill out your actions as you're working through the program. And because it's a single document, what it means is if you get back to practice, you can share it with your practice manager, you just attach it and email it. You can share it with your associates, your partners. It's a really nice way to get consistency across the practice for your consults and the approach you want to take. And then the final thing we did, we follow up with 2 90-minute coaching web classes, like group coaching calls, because you've all been, and I've been, on programs where you have a couple of days, you get all excited, you think that's great, and then you go back into practice and you're back into the kind of groove of what you did before. We really want to break that cycle. We do it through the accountability partners, and we do it through these follow-up coaching workshops where we're really encouraging you to go beyond the 2 days, think about implementation, and then come back and be accountable to update us on how you've progressed, what's worked, what you still need help with, and how we can support you to coach you to implement as effectively as possible. We found with our corporate programs, it's been really, really effective in helping people adopt and make their own commitments to themselves to make the changes that they need. And then beyond that, we'll be looking at kind of mastermind group coaching calls and building some communities outside of just our Practice Growth Academy as well. So it's a really nice, very well-designed program. It flows really nicely. First step is the patient experience scorecard. So we'll share these slides with you afterwards. You can click this link, take the scorecard. That's free. That gets you that kind of initial kind of diagnostic about where you are right now and where you could gain benefit from focusing. This is the toolkit I mentioned, so just a kind of screenshot. This is how it looks. So lots of documents, quite a comprehensive model that we use as part of our approach. And in terms of what does it look like, the Practice Growth Academy is a 2-day workshop. As I said, we're hosting it at Y Boston Lakes Hotel in Cambridgeshire. It's a beautiful hotel set in a golf course, surrounded by lakes. Really, really lovely setting. The 2 90-minute group coaching sessions are online afterwards. We're limiting it to 30 places, and our first program starts in January, Friday the 27th and 28th of January. We are offering a 10% early booking discount for anybody who books before the end of the month. If anybody would like a call with me outside of tonight, then there's this calendar setting here. When we send the slides through, you just click on this link and you'll be able to book a 30-minute one-to-one with me to learn more about it if that's something you'd like to explore further. Final thing. While you're just kind of capturing your own questions, we'll take Q&A in just a moment. A couple of things that are really have been really useful for me. I'll share these with you because I'm passionate about it, but I'll also share it with you because there might be something that resonates for you and your practice as well. So the mission that we're on at Focus for Growth is about truly bringing world-class business best practice into dentistry. We're trying to look what's working outside of dentistry that is a fit for dentistry and how can that help our clients. And then the second is to think about how that helps them to become market leaders, the market leaders in your community, so that you can make a bigger positive impact for your teams, but also, a bigger impact in the world, because that's important. We've all got a bigger role to play if we want to play it. And as well as vision and mission, we've also taken time to outline our values, and we have these 5 values in Focus for Growth. I won't talk about all of them, but I will talk about the top one, which is about being a force for good in the world. And it sounds very lofty. And even when I say it, sometimes I feel like the imposter monster is kind of sitting there going, really, in the world? But, set a goal big and really go for it is my motto. And what we've done is aligned with these, I don't know if anybody's aware of the United Nations Global Goals. So there are 17 goals that the United Nations world leaders came together and pulled this committee together and said, right, actually, how do we improve life on Earth for everyone? These 17 goals have been mapped. And the advice is, if you are interested, if you want to align with them, then pick one that really means something to you, that you can get passionate about, and you can become an ambassador for. So we choose goal 8, decent work and economic growth. And we're also proud members of the Pledge 1% community. And we pledge 1% of resources and time to good causes. And we really are advocates for trying to improve, working environments, helping teams to become better at what they do so they can drive growth in their businesses. And the way I do my Pledge 1% and Force for Good initiative is this Walk and Talk for Men group that I founded in Cambridgeshire. So I founded this a couple of years ago, and we meet every fortnight and provide support for men's mental health in the Cambridgeshire area. It's something that's particularly kind of poignant for me. I had a couple of challenges with my own mental health back in 2016-17. It was one of the reasons I left the corporate world. I just kind of had enough of the pressure. But I recognised at that time there's very limited resources, very limited support for people who are struggling, and actually it's the simple things like building a community, like providing space to talk, to open up about what's really happening, and getting some perspective from other people. That's so important to helping you recover and manage yourselves. And dentistry is a really good example of where the pressure is really high. So I share this with you because. One, because it's a passion of mine, but two, because I hopefully it might inspire you to think differently about your own businesses, your own practices, the participation you have in your own communities, and thinking about how you connect up the dots between the work you do and the impact you make. Because it's been really beneficial for me personally, just to be part of an initiative like this, but also something that is particularly rewarding and seems to have really made a closer connection with me and my local community that's been enjoyable as well. Okay, I feel like I've talked non-stop for far too long, but a final message. Hopefully that inspires you to think about your own impact. And if anybody would like to contact me, this QR code here, feel free to scan this code. You get access to all my socials. You can connect with me. You can message me. You'll be able to connect and do all sorts of things with that. And then finally, we will go to questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to invite Chris and Andy to come back in, and we'll take some questions from people if they'd like to join us.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
That was great, Justin. Thank you. I wrote loads down. I've wrote loads down. Lots of scribbling.
That was really good. Just as an opener, Justin, you went through a lot of stuff, and when you break it down into piecemeal bits, it's all pretty straightforward. Yeah. We always say the same thing. It's not rocket science. We know what we've got to do. So why is it so damn hard to actually take the action? Why is it so hard? You can sit there and go, I know I need to do it. I know it will move me forward. I know all the good stuff that will happen if I do this. So why is it on a consistent basis so flipping hard to have that consistency and take that action?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably lots of reasons, I'm sure, Andy. The one that I come back to time and time again is just that we all get so consumed and busy and overwhelmed with just doing the day-to-day stuff that's got to be done. And it's like anything. If you don't, I don't know if you've ever seen that video of the university professor in the classroom where he's got the great big jug.
Oh, yeah.
And he puts the rocks in it. And once the rocks are in it, he says, is the jar full? They say, yeah. And then he puts pebbles in it, and that fills up. And he says, is the jar full? Yeah. Then he puts sand in it, fills in between the cracks. And he says, is it full? Yeah. Then he puts water in it. And well, he's done that. And he says, the important lesson is, if you don't create and make time for the big rocks, the pebbles, the sand, and the water is going to fill your jar. The jar's you and life, right? If you never get the chance to put those rocks in, there's never space for them. It's the same with these topics, this subject tonight. If we don't create the space and the time to become really intentional about it, the reason we don't get to it is because all the other stuff in life just fills the jar. And so, but what is really interesting is that once you start, so one of the things that a lot of my clients find really valuable, they'll take this business administration day. So they start with, right, I'm going to take a period of time. For some people, one day might be too much at the start. You might say, right, I'm going to Friday afternoons from now on, they're a working afternoon, but I'm not doing clinical practice. They are dedicated for me to build out my growth plan, to have conversations with my team, to start to track my progress, to set some goals, to do all the things I want to do. But having that regular slot where it's protected time to do it, that one thing can be transformational for your business.
Yeah, it's like booking yourself an appointment.
Yes, it is. Yeah, a meeting with yourself that's as important as a meeting with someone else.
Yeah. That's what we used to say in the bank. Yeah. Was the fact of you book yourself an appointment and realise it's so important. We also had these things which we produced at Frank Taylor's because they used to say things like, "You'll never get round to it. You'll never get round to it. You actually have to want to do it and create space, otherwise it never happens." So we've made these little coasters, what we call round to it, and we give them to people and say, this is to make sure you get round to it, because it is without that focus and deliberateness, it won't happen, because there's so much more going on in our lives, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I like that. Get round to it as a coach. That's a really good analogy. I like that, Chris.
Something else you said as well, Justin, you're talking about, find something you're passionate about, you enjoy, and you're good at. And I was thinking of the Japanese thing, the ikigai.
Ikigai, yeah.
The continuation of that is to also find something you get paid for, and something the world needs.
Yeah.
And I guess for dentists, they do get paid for what they do, and it is absolutely something the world needs. Yeah. So if you can get passionate about the bit that you're really into, and you can really fall in love with it, then you really are on the right track, aren't you? And then that sets you up well to make the improvements that you've been talking about.
Yeah. And Andy, that I don't know. So I've done a bit of reading on the Ikigai model, and it's fascinating because the practice of Ikigai is in a particular region of Japan. And what they've found is that all of the people that live in the region where it's not a religion, but it's a really common practice. It's something that is part of the local culture. They've found that the lifespan of the people that practice it is something crazy, like 20% longer than the other inhabitants of Japan. So, and partly that's because it's like fuel. It's like the elixir of life, right? Find the answer to those 4 questions, and you'll just feel more energized. You'll want to live longer and probably be, a better leader and a better parent and a better, friend, a better family member, because you're enjoying what you do. It just energizes you.
Yeah, no, I must admit, it was one that when I was right at the beginning, you were saying, that free link, which I think people should download to take their sort of like tests as such. And what stunned me was, I think, was it 1,247? I can't remember the precise number, but I do remember you said 75% people said they need to revisit their patient experience. And then I sit there thinking, I wonder how many actually did.
That's the challenge, isn't it? That is the challenge, yeah.
And that's a real simple one. I mean, that's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's probably one of the easy. Well, as you say, it's a start point to think about. Well, what's a patient experience like? But it's fascinating.
It's also one of those things that does need engagement from the whole team.
Yeah.
Because the patient experience is every interaction, isn't it? It's not just what happens, in the surgery. It's the interaction with the receptionist. It's the website. It's
definitely.
The follow-up process. It's the nurse's greeting. It's the hygienist.
But also from the principal's point of view, very often a principal could be locked away in a surgery for 2, 3, 3.5, 4 days a week. Yeah. So I guess when you're in your surgery, it's very hard to lead your business if you don't have good systems and well-trained people and good operating procedures. Everyone's waiting to be led and directed. But as a principal, if you're locked away in your surgery treating a patient, in that moment, you're of no use to your business.
No. Well, unless, Andy, as you say, you've set up the system, you've trained, coached, everybody's clear on expectations. And actually, you've got confidence that people understand it, are engaged to deliver it. Then it works. But if you haven't done that, you're absolutely right. It's a risk. Almost doing the work you love becomes a risk for you.
Yes, I love the fact that you said, Justin. It's so true, isn't it? That it's a team sport. And I think sometimes people forget that it's a team sport because they don't want to share. They don't want to let people in because they don't want to show too much. But as you sort of said, you can show enough to get people engaged to support you on your journey, because it's bloody hard work, isn't it? I mean, we're business owners, and but I'm probably extremely lucky, and I have Andy as my partner, so as we can sort of bounce ideas off of. But
I wish I could say the same. Honestly, it'd be great to say that.
In fact, you don't even know who I am. But if you're working on your own in the pressure of that environment, you need someone. You need that sort of and that team.
We've said it many a time. I guys like you, Justin, and other people who literally are on their own. I couldn't do it. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough depth of skills. Honestly, I think having a partner of some sort, it makes life so much easier. So much easier. So hats off to you for doing it all on your own. It's very impressive.
And for all the
thank you. I don't feel smart enough most days, Andy. So but it is, it's hard work, and there'll be, the gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen on this call will be in the same position. There'll be practice principals who are on their own doing this a lot of the time. It's hard work, and actually having your team on board, genuinely on board, if you've invested the time in having those conversations, in sharing the plans and thinking about, okay, what is in it for them to fully engage in this? What do we do to make sure that if we meet our goals, there's some recognition and reward for them? It's so important, because without that, why would somebody commit? Why would somebody feel as passionate about it as us if they don't have some kind of interest in it? But it's such an easy one to overlook, such an easy miss.
Well, you sort of think everyone's surely got to love it. Why don't they love it? It's that sort of thing, but you never asked.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully people have got I'd love if people have got 2 or 3 key takeaways tonight. Feel free to get in touch with Chris, Andy, or myself to give us some feedback. Or if you'd like to know a bit more, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd be very happy to hear from you. It's been I've really enjoyed. It's been a great conversation at the end as well. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andy.
I think the biggest takeaway for me, Justin, is to go to that your website and download that stuff and get cracking.
Yeah.
Because that's got to be a start point, hasn't it? That's got to be a start point.
Yeah, give yourself that kind of sense check. Where are we? Where are we?
Definitely. For me, that would be, anyone on it goes straight to your website, do it, and then that will at least give you, whether you'll be one of the people who said 75% and then don't do anything or whatever it is, but we never know. But at least you can start a journey. Yeah,
absolutely. And people can get their teams to do it. If you want to get your associates, your even your nurses, anybody that in the practice that has an impact on the patient experience, feel free to share the link with them and create some awareness as a starting point.
And I suppose also expose yourself, not in a rude way, but do you know what I mean? You're making yourself vulnerable in a way if you're getting your team to do it, aren't you? So I think it's really good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Justin. That was fabulous. Really, really enjoyable, which is good.
Oh, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chris. Thanks both so much for setting tonight up and for inviting people. I'll send you the slides from tonight, and I'll send you the link separately as well. So if you're happy to share that with the audience, and then if anybody wants to get in touch, they've got the option to do that as well.
Brilliant. And we'll also send out the recording of the seminar, the webinar.
Yeah, perfect.
Lovely.